May I request you to come closer? I won't bite you. Tudo bem? I'm curious. I'd like to open with a question. Who is here because of the word Tantra? Okay, tell me. It's a very loaded word. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I'd like to begin with a little bit of a maybe storytelling mode. Not exactly telling a story, but allowing you to also use your imagination with it. Think about or imagine the evolution of our species. And at some time in the distant past, as the hominids transformed into Homo sapiens, and the biological workings and chemistry of our bodies and our nervous system became sophisticated enough to become complex enough and sophisticated enough to begin to process and be more and more aware of our emotions. Sometime in that evolutionary past, the humans basically learned to worship nature, the forces around them, and it was mainly based on fear, at least for a large part of our...
That was what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It started with that, and then perhaps that later transformed into a kind of reverence or awe anyway. But at some point in that, and once our biology and neurology and makeup allowed the mind of those early human beings to begin to reflect upon their existence. And at some point in time, some men or women began to question the deep existential questions that ultimately most all human beings begin to ask. Who am I? What is all of this? Why? And again, at that time in our evolution, the minds were always looking outwardly, trying to surmise, to understand ourself and our place in the world because of all the big forces around us. But at some point in that journey, some, maybe we should say pioneering or vanguard-like humans, began to, because of their dissatisfaction or their inability to get a satisfying answer, began to consider, maybe I can look within rather than without. And then the process of what we today can call reflection, self-awareness, began. Sometime, who can say, but at least from what I've learned, perhaps 10 to 15,000 years ago. Difficult to say. Maybe one day anthropologists and others will be able to say it more exactly. But the ancient texts and verbal teachings, oral teachings that have come down from places like India and Tibet and all that, they even have names. They identify certain people even by their names that were maybe the earliest of teachers who began to then pass their experience to someone else. For example, one name is Angasira or Angira. Some of the ancient teachings talk about these personalities. And so, and I'll explain in a little while why I'm sharing all of this, because I think it gives a nice context to understanding. That developed then in its own slow way over thousands of years of experimentation by certain individuals who, in those days, from what we can tell, secluded themselves. They went to jungles or mountains or caves to explore, to conduct this internal research, investigation into the nature of their being. And eventually, that developed in a more systematic way. And so, the Tantra, I only saw the poster for this series of talks today when Alexander sent it to me. So I didn't know that he was labeling it as Tantra Yoga until today, but that's fine. And I'll explain more about our particular flavor or orientation of Tantra, and that's why I'm sharing everything that I've been saying until now. So there was a great personality who appeared, who was born and lived about 7,000 years ago, from what I've learned. And his name is widely known throughout the world, but even in India, even amongst the Hindus, and I'm not a Hindu, I'm not a Buddhist, I'm not a Hindu, I'm a yogi. But his name is Shiva, or Sada Shiva, more exactly. And everybody's heard about Shiva or maybe seen the image of Shiva dancing and et cetera, et cetera. And most people, as I started to say, think that he was a mythological god. But from what I've learned, he was a human being that lived, God-like. And he's considered, he has many, many, many names, and one of them is Adi Deva, which means the first Lord, or the first God-like being, because he was considered the first, from the tantric point of view, the first world teacher, the great teacher, or whatever different names are given to it. So I know in the series, I don't know how many of the other speakers that you've been attending, and I know, if I remember correct, 3 of them were Buddhist teachers, different Buddhist styles or traditions, Zen and Theravada and Vajrayana. Vajrayana is also known as Tantric Buddhism. The Tibetan Buddhism is known as Tantric Buddhism. So the root, and everyone knows that Buddha was from India, and Buddhism spread from India northeast. So this part of the world, what is now India, Tibet, that region of the world, is where all such teachings, at least from those Oriental traditions, were born and began. And it is said that, and all the different, whatever religion or sect or following you find in India, all of them relate back to Shiva, one way or the other. Even the Vaishnavas, whose main god is Krishna, will also speak about Shiva, and there's different interpretations, and scholars discuss and debate, but everything relates always back to Shiva. And Shiva was the giver of Tantra. There's something called Agama and Nigama in classical Tantra. So there's 64 classical texts that are the original Tantras, and they're based on something called Agama and Nigama. And that is the questions that Parvati, Shiva's first wife, he had 3 wives, that the questions she would ask him and the answers he would give. And those are the basis of the Tantra teachings. But what I want to convey more than all of this more scholarly or historical detail, is from the point of view of what I'm referring to and what I practice and what I share with people. Tantra is simply a pure, rational, scientifically based, in the broadest or most holistic sense of science, spiritual practice. A practice that is aimed at liberation. In fact, the Sanskrit word tantra, when you translate the syllables, means that which liberates from bondage, or crudity, or staticity, or dullness. Or another interpretation is that which liberates through expansion. Expansion of mind, elevation of consciousness. So Tantra, from this point of view, nothing to do with exotic sexuality or couples and dynamics of relationships. That's all actually a misnomer. Actually, it has nothing to do with Tantra. The Kama Sutra, this famous text of different sexual positions, is nothing to do with Tantra. It has nothing to do with Hinduism. It just somehow got misunderstood and caught up in all of these things. And again, other scholars won't agree with what I just said. I'm not a scholar. So there's always lots of debate and discussion about all of these things. But the main point here is Tantra, any form of meditative practice, of spiritual practice that actually has a rational base to it, and again, in the highest sense of rationality, not the very barren, rational, scientific approach that dominates the West so much, and now the whole world, but that aims at liberating human beings, expanding our minds, elevating our consciousness, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. That is an expression of Tantra. And we say, Tantra is yoga, yoga is Tantra. So all the known practices in the world today of the yogic traditions, of asanas, the different postures and stretches, the mudras, bandhas, and the different meditation practices, those are all expressions of Tantra. They've all come from the tradition and the root teachings of Tantra. The chakras and kundalini and all of this science and description is all coming from the tantric tradition, tantric teachings. And we say it is, though I'm going to talk a bit more, we say it's 99% practice and 1% theory. And I would definitely want to share some practice with you this evening as well. So just any question or comment so far from what I've shared? Pretty simple. It all is.
Is it all interconnected? The physical exercises and the stretching with the meditation?
Very much.
Or can you separate things?
Unfortunately, in the world today, they've been very separated, but it's not really proper. Because, and I'll speak to that as well, and there's the tradition of, not the modern day yoga school that was started by Pattabhi Jois, I think is his name, that uses the name Ashtanga or Astanga Yoga, but rather the original Astanga Yoga, which is attributed to a particular saint named Patanjali, who lived about the time of Buddha, about 2,500 years ago, though all of the principles were existing before him, but he codified it into a formal school of philosophical teaching. So I can explain more about that in a bit. So even Buddhism and the Buddhist traditions are a form of Tantra. And, or we would say, though the Vajrayana school is classically known as Tantric Buddhism, but all forms of mysticism, mystical practice, spiritual practice, again, that aim at liberating us are expressions of it. Though, again, there's a classical schools, there's 6 different schools of Tantra, the Shakta, the Saurya, the Shaivite. You can read about all of these, and each of them have their own emphasis and flavor, but it's about. So Sao monge de Ananda Marga. So, Ananda Marga is, we say that's the movement, the name of the teaching and the movement that I represent. Ananda Marga means the path of bliss. You've been hearing a lot about meditation. How many of you are practicing regularly some meditation, whatever it is? Yeah, okay. Something. Okay. Tell me in just a few words or whatever comes to you naturally. So what is meditation?
Concentration.
Mm-hmm.
Anything.
Anything. Okay.
Liberation.
Okay. There's no right or wrong. I'm just curious. Awareness. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Path of peace.
Path of peace. Okay. You want to add anything?
Yes.
You agree with that one? Path of peace. Yeah. Okay. What if I told you it's about falling madly in love with everyone and everything? Or, well, there's a couple of words in Sanskrit terms that describe it. And I would say, so the movement, the teaching is called Path of Bliss. Ananda means bliss. My monastic name, Mahaprajinananda. And that's a mouthful for months, so I usually make a joke. MP, you can call me MP, but you can't vote for me. MP, Member of Parliament. Can also be military police. So, there's a Sanskrit word that's used for meditation in general spiritual practice. And when you translate it from English, so many of the words of Sanskrit, that's why I took trouble also to say what the meaning of Tantra is from, again, you'll get other interpretations of it, but my guru was very much a linguist and really into languages. Some of his books on languages are being used as textbooks in universities in Bangladesh and India right now. And the later part of his life, before he left his body, was just encyclopedia and dictionaries and just so many comparative language studies and like this. So he was really into defining terms. And I really think it's helpful because it gives a clear idea about things that are often confused. So like Tantra, if you understand what the word actually translates from Sanskrit into English, it gives more of a clear idea. Mantra, everybody hears the word mantra. What does mantra mean? Or what, not what is a mantra. What does the word mantra mean? Manifesting. Okay. I mean, we know it. Oh, it's a mystic sound, or it's a chant, or that. Okay. But again, so tantra, tra, to liberate. Tan means again dullness or expansion, either way. So mantra, tra, to liberate. Man, from manas, the Sanskrit word for human mind. So mantra is that which liberates the mind, that which frees our mind, by focusing on it, by repeating it. So like this. So there's another word in Sanskrit that's used for meditation practice, spiritual practice in general. And it's, when you translate it, and I think this is really beautiful, it means the effort to become complete. The effort to become whole, to become complete. Or sometimes it's also translated as completing the journey. Do you feel complete? Does our world today reflect a society filled with people who feel complete in themselves? So what does that mean to us, to feel complete? Or another it's two words together. When you translate it, means to always keep the mind absorbed in the thought of or remembering the supreme or divine or what do you like to think of that as? The essence, the self. There's many ways, different traditions, and people call it God, if that's not too controversial a word for you. So, but to always keep the mind absorbed in the thought of the great, supreme, the supreme consciousness. So that gives, those two terms give a really clear idea about what Ananda Marga thinks meditation is about. There are some teachings or traditions that say it's about emptying the mind. We say it's about filling the mind, keeping the mind constantly focused on that one thing. Which, if you do it well enough and deeply enough, ultimately it will take you to another state that takes you beyond the ordinary thoughts. But it's a method, it's an approach to that. And it also understands the nature of our human minds. Our minds think, at least our conscious mind. We have conscious, subconscious, unconscious, or yogis sometimes say superconscious mind. What does the mind do? The conscious mind anyway, and the subconscious mind. It thinks, remembers, which is a form of thinking, and it thinks. If I ask you to sit right now and close your eyes and try to think of absolutely nothing, do you think you can do it, or do you want to try it? You can. So usually I often ask people to do like this, and then, okay, give it a try. Just relax and close your eyes, be comfortable, and just for a few moments, try to think of absolutely nothing. Try to think of absolutely nothing. And now, try to think of anything except a pink elephant. And what happened? You can open your eyes. Could anyone think of nothing? You're not sure. Maybe.
A little bit.
Yeah. Maybe you were thinking about nothing?
I was experiencing the blackness of being with my eyes closed.
Okay. Generally, it's not very easy, or next to impossible for most human beings to think of nothing. But what happened when you tried to think of anything except a pink elephant? Saw a pink elephant. The first thing at least it flashes. So the science of meditation in the Tantric tradition is based on a very simple understanding about the way our minds are, the way they work, at least the normal state of function. And one is that it's really next to impossible to think of nothing. And what's the next best thing, or the closest thing to thinking of no thing? Is to think of only one thing. And we know modern science and clinical practice, psychiatry, or they've been using this for decades and decades. They called it the relaxation response. After studying it and experimenting, they coined it into a therapeutic practice called the relaxation response, which is simply guiding people to think of only one thing. So it's used in clinical, it's used in therapy, because it helps people relax. It has almost instantaneous positive physiological and psychological effects. It relaxes the nerves and muscles, it slows down the respiratory rate, the pulse. So, and it's based on a science that the mystics and yogis and meditative people have known for thousands and thousands of years. So we try to think of only one thing. Now, our minds are very powerful. You might be familiar with some paranormal phenomenon or research, or about psychic powers, or anyone does martial arts? Which one?
Jiu-jitsu.
Okay. I don't know about in Jiu-jitsu. In Aikido and many others, there's a beginning exercise, training exercise called lock arm. Basically where, the students are told to stand firmly rooted in the ground, feel like they're a mountain or an ancient tree, rooted to the earth, immovable, and then they're to hold their arm out like this and concentrate that all the energies of the earth are flowing up and out their arm, and concentrate, and then the sensei, the master, will come along and try to put down the arm. And if the person is concentrated, someone can hang their body weight and the arm won't go. And if you lose concentration, in a moment. So, it's just a simple thing of, call it mind over matter or whatever. Kung Fu, martial arts, they use it. I don't know if you believe it or not. You've heard of maybe Uri Geller. This is an Israeli man who bends spoons, like this, through his mind power. But, whatever. There's many examples in our life and in society of the power of positive thinking. Think and grow rich. The power of negative thinking. When a human being like Adolf Hitler, well-known example, can affect so many, countless thousands of people. If you've ever seen the videos of him speaking to a big crowd, and when I do, it's like you can feel the power of this man's mind. But unfortunately, the way he used it, we all know. And he's just one example of many. So, our minds are very powerful. Now, if you take all those three together, difficult to think of nothing, think of only one thing, the mind is powerful, that means we should be careful what we focus our minds on. If we care about ourselves and the world we live in and other people, that means we should care a lot about what we focus our minds on. And there's another ancient teaching from Tantra that says, when you translate from the Sanskrit, as you think, so you become. As you think, so you become. Or Buddha said it slightly differently, the same thing, your thoughts are your reality. So the tantric approach to meditation is based on this idea then that your effort in meditating is, that translation I mentioned earlier, the effort to become complete. That implies that it requires an effort. Because our minds, as you experienced when you tried to think of nothing, our minds are wandering most of the time. I'm sure you've experienced daydreaming, where it's like, you started thinking about something and then suddenly a few seconds later you're like, how did I wind up there? And there's an exercise you can do where you actually watch your mind wandering. Intentionally watch the wandering of your mind and see, the speed of light can't compare to the speed of thought. So we consciously choose to focus the mind on something that is elevating, inspiring, expanding. And we do that through the use of mantra, that which liberates the mind. And therefore, the mantras that we learn and use, and I'll share one with you today, they have a meaning. It's not just a sound. The sound has an effect. Acoustics, we know sound, music affects us. The acoustics have an effect. It has a vibrational effect, a frequency. We can all understand that. And the meaning moves the mind, carries the mind, moves it towards its object or goal. So this idea we have in meditation, that because as you think, so you become, so you want to select something that's very proper, that's very elevating, that's inspiring. So if you find something that's about peace or bliss, to me they're the same. What do human beings really want? Everyone in the world is busy running after. I mean, our society today is structured. Modern capitalist society is, and even the state capitalism of China, whatever, it's all the same. The whole society is structured on spending most of our time every day to do things that just allow us to exist. Most people, most of the time, and excuse me, I lost my train of thought. But we want to utilize the time and direct our minds towards something that fulfills us. People are chasing things. This is where I was coming to. People are chasing things, mostly material things, often about relationships, things that we get, or some experiences. You know, I want to, whatever it is, go skydiving or go to some tropical island or whatever. And all those things are great. There's nothing wrong with any one of them. But when they become all-consuming of our time and energy, and the problem with them is they don't last. Right? Whether it's possessions, material possessions, whether it's relationships, whether it's experiences, none of them last. They're all fleeting phenomena. They might last for decades and decades. They might last for moments. But they don't last. And they are outside of our own self. They're external. Externalities. So you call it peace, you call it bliss, but what it is that we ultimately want, and you all know this is the basis of all spiritual practice and teachings. What we ultimately want is something that's within us and that is eternal. So the yogic teachings, let me just again go back to some historical context. So we say then that Tantra and Yoga, and they're one and the same, is the root from which all the Eastern traditions that we know today by different names have grown. That science of that practice of finding lasting fulfillment, finding peace, knowing yourself, whatever way we label it, falling madly in love with everyone and everything. All of that, that's what became Hinduism. Buddha's teachings were a response to the Hindu dogma of the day and the limitations of its teachings. Taoism, my guru again explained how the word Tantra became Tao as it moved eastward. The word Dhyan, one form of meditation practice, one of the 8 pillars of the Astaungika Yoga tradition is Dhyan, the Sanskrit word. Dhyan became Chan in Chinese. It became Son in Korean and Zen in Japanese. Dhyan is teaching of pure reflection, pure meditation, you can say. So, from our perspective, that root of the tantric teaching and the yogic teachings is what gave birth to everything else historically that's followed along these Eastern contemplative traditions. Again, maybe not everyone would agree with that. But I think even history bears a lot of witness to it. So, and all of them are aiming at that, maybe aiming at that same thing. When I asked you, what is it you really want, or what is meditation about? I said peace. Everyone said something related to the same. We're seeking something, we call it the thirst for limitlessness. Inside every living being is a thirst for limitlessness. We want something more, something greater. You have a pet dog or cat? Life is pretty easy, right? Give some food or water, a sunny spot on the floor, a little bit of affection. Life is good. Don't need much else. Animals also have science. The making of a spider's web or a bird's nest is also a science. But that science has remained the same for how many countless thousands of years? Human beings' science and creativity evolves, as has our civilization and culture and everything else with it. So there's something different about us. When our dog or cat looks at itself in the mirror, it doesn't know that it's seeing itself, as far as we can tell. It can see another animal. It might bark or scratch or whatever. It sees that there's another being, but it doesn't know it's looking at itself. Human beings are able to have self-awareness. You mentioned awareness. Self-awareness. And it's that quality in us that sets us apart from all other living beings. And it's that understanding and fulfilling of that self-discovery that is a way of describing also what's meditation about. And that's within us, always possible, always present. Not external, not fleeting. So, Ananda Marga, the movement that I represent, so it based on these ancient traditions and teachings, it started in the 1950s in India, in the northeast of India. And from its very beginning, it was a bit unique in that we combine the spiritual, the philosophical teachings, the practices of the meditation and yogic practices together with a very equally important emphasis on social involvement, on community service work, development work, and social change work, justice and rights, and etc. From the very beginning, this slogan or motto of the movement translates as, for the liberation of self and for the welfare of all, or the welfare of the universe. And again, this is attributed back to a teaching of Shiva from 7,000 years ago. So it was never a spirituality that shunned the world or taught to be a recluse or that this is not real, this is Maya or illusion. We don't accept those ideas at all. And it was controversial from day one because it was also against the caste system in India, which is incredibly strong and deeply entrenched in Indian society. It doesn't accept idol worship. We're not Hindu. And of many of the dogmas, what we see as the dogmas of modern day Hinduism were not accepted. The dowry system, the dowry system, when there's going to be a marriage, the family of the girl usually has to give a huge amount of money or wealth of some kind of another, land, animals, jewelry, whatever, to the family of the boy, like this, so very exploitative, to the extent that sometimes baby girls are killed because they don't want to be a burden to the family, doesn't want to have the burden of having to suffer that situation. So from the beginning it was quite a radical departure of movements, the spiritual movements up until then. And also it has a very detailed and wide-ranging social philosophy, a social economic theory, a vision of a society that's made up of economically and socially decentralized regions that are self-sufficient and very participatory, lively. So I brought some brochures about some of the work we do. It translates into different kinds of activities, and actually here in Portugal, especially where I stay in Cova de Beira, near at a place called we call Ananda Valley. There's a really good example of all kinds of things going on, and a bit here in Lisboa as well. So service work, but not only. Almost all religious and spiritual movements do good charitable work, and that's wonderful and needed in the world today. But more important is we shouldn't have to be doing it, at least on the material level, anymore. We should create a society where there is no more poverty, where there are not people going hungry or homeless, and there's absolutely no reason that we don't do it except for the political will of so-called leaders. There's absolutely inexcusable in the 21st century, what to speak of the 20th century, that anyone on this planet is starving to death. And so translate the compassion, the love, the values of spirituality into practice in the world means you create policies and laws that implement the reality of justice. We shouldn't denude the rainforests. Why are we doing it? So that more cows can eat more grass and sell more hamburgers, and it's just, you know it all. You know more than I do probably. You're intelligent young people and are very aware, I hope, of the conditions in the planet today. Most of them, and you are young, right? So. And but this is where we have a saying in American English, where the rubber meets the road. Maybe you've heard it before. If we need to walk our talk. So if spirituality can't translate into making a better society in practice, and unfortunately, a lot of teachings, either defective teachings or wrong interpretations of them, have had tremendous social impact over the millennia. So, like the idea of this world is an illusion. Mayavad, one of the principal ideas of Hindu thought, philosophical thought out of India, that has made people passive and complacent, so that somebody who's an untouchable beggar in India will think that, oh, this is my karma. This is, divine dispensation that I am poor and I can't do anything to change it. Or just don't worry so much about all that, oppression and evil in the world, because it's just an illusion anyway. Along with all the riches that everyone is getting and everything else. Doesn't really make a difference. It's not real. If someone tells me like that, I'll say, okay, please stop eating. Let's see how long the world is not real for. So, and it's based on a shloka or a mantra or a verse from a particular incredibly wise, otherwise wise teacher, very influential, one of the greatest scholars of Indian tradition named Shankaracharya, who said this. He said, and it basically mirrors the idealistic teachings of the Greeks as well, that only God is real. Everything else is false or illusion or not real. Ananda Marga philosophy says the supreme consciousness is absolute reality and everything else is a relative reality. It's real, but it's all relative to the essence, the source, whatever you call it again, which our self, our deepest self, the soul, the spirit, the self, the consciousness, whatever you like to call it, for us all those words are the same, is what's real. We have a body. Each of our bodies is unique and different. And despite what mass media might be telling you, your body is beautiful. Each of us has a mind. It's unique and different. You don't want someone seeing everything that's in there, do you? And our minds are beautiful. And each of us has something else, something more. Call it self, soul, spirit, whatever it might be. That's exactly the same in each and every one of us. And that is what yoga and I would say all the other teachings of self-contemplation and reflection and meditation are aiming at. That you know that. And knowing means experiencing it. And because it's the same in each of us, and not only us, but everything, every being, every atom, neutrino, quark, whatever. When you experience that, when you touch that place inside, nothing else feels like that. That's the point of that peace, or bliss, or pure awareness. And so, I mentioned before about Patanjali, who's regarded as the founder of the yogic teaching, the classical school of yoga, one of 6 formal schools of classical philosophy from India, and what's known as Astanga Yoga, or the eight-limbed path. And he said his definition of this word yoga was, it is the suspension of the mental tendencies, the suspension of the mind. We say, so first of all, again, the word yoga means union. It translates as union, experiencing that oneness. So we say yoga is the union of the individual self with the cosmic or supreme self. Individual consciousness, self means consciousness, with the cosmic or supreme consciousness, infinite consciousness. And that experience of that oneness is what gives peace, bliss, self-knowledge, what satisfies finally that constant thirst for limitlessness. So, enough theory? How are we doing with our time? 6:02. All right, so just about 20 minutes. Good. Okay, but any question or comment? Then I'd like to lead you into a meditation.
had one.
On the
A while ago.
Okay.
What is your technique?
I'm sorry?
What is your technique in meditation? Is about
That's what we'll do right now. My little tool here also. So, when people feel the way of meditation that we do and share suits them and they like to go deeper in it and learn it, they can receive an initiation from a teacher like myself, or there's one who's not a monk, but a very experienced teacher who's also here in Lisboa, who lives here in the Lisboa area. And the basis of the meditation practice is with mantra. It's not limited to only that, but it begins with that, and that continues throughout, and then other things are added in. There's a series of 6 lessons of meditation that people can learn. Usually it takes a period of years to learn them all. And in that you receive a personal mantra. Personal mantra doesn't mean there's nearly 8 billion different mantras in the world. I mean, there are some mantras, and one of them is suitable for each particular person. And that's part of the training we have as teachers, to know which one. But we have, what we call our universal mantra, which I'd like to introduce you to now, and which I started with years ago, decades ago. And we also, I've been having this congestion for some time now. We also use it for kirtan, or singing the mantra. We sing the mantra before meditating. We also dance with it. Well, don't have to do that right now. You're most welcome. We have a little center in Olaish, and every Monday evening there's an open kirtan and meditation. So, different programs throughout the year as well. So, if you'd like to just make yourselves comfortable in a meditative position and mood. The universal mantra has 3 words. Don't worry now about remembering, because we'll sing it for a few minutes, 5 minutes maybe, so it will become very familiar to you. The first word is Baba, B-A-B-A. The second is Nam, N-A-M, Nam. And the third is Kevalam, Kevalam, K-E-V-A-L-A-M. Baba Nam Kevalam. The simplified, the figurative translation is infinite love, universal or infinite love is all there is the only thing, or is everywhere. Everything is that. Everything is only the expression of that infinite love. The more exact, literal translation, Baba means beloved, the most beloved, or the most near and dear. What's most near and dear? You may think your own self, your deepest self, or the beloved, a devotional way of feeling about the Supreme. the essence of all, that source of all being, the divine, whichever way you think of that. Nam means name, and Kevalam only. So the more literal translation, only the name of the most beloved, the most near and dear. Whichever way, whichever translation you like best. So, amor infinito. Think of it in Portuguese if you like better. So we'll just sing for a few minutes together. Don't be shy, please sing out loud. If you like to sing, if you like to harmonize, go ahead. And then I'll guide you into a little bit of silent meditation with the mantra. Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Kevalam, Baba Nam Baba Nam Kevalam, 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 Baba Nam Kevalam. With your eyes closed, sitting comfortably, gently hold your back, neck, and head straight, but comfortable, relaxed. Let the breathing flow through your nose. Gently. Slowly. But naturally. Without stress or strain. Allow your inner energies to settle, become centered. Turn your attention inwardly. There is a sublime atmosphere all around you. And within you. Peaceful. Vibrant. Loving for those qualities reflect the essence of your being. Which reflects the essence of all being. And with that feeling, with that awareness, continue to silently recite the Baba Nam Kevalam mantra with no particular melody, but just a continuous rhythmic repetition. You begin to feel, begin to hear within yourself. Baba Nam Kevalam. Let the sound and meaning of the mantra together like one. Let it fill your mind. Let it flow through your mind. Again. And again. And again. Let the mantra's sound and meaning and the feeling it brings you, let that become the only thought, the only sound, the only thing in your mind. Baba Nam Kevalam. And when you notice other thoughts or other sounds have taken your attention, return your focus, all your concentrated attention, only on the mantra, its sound and meaning, and the feeling it brings. Baba Nam Kevalam. Meditation is most effective when it is done regularly, each and every day. as my Rasta friends would say, every blessed day. It can be done anytime, anywhere, for any amount of time. But best is early morning, before or during the sunrise, before you do other things, before eating. And again, well, around this time, in the evening, the time between the day and the night. Ideally, again, before the evening meal. But most important is regularity. Ideally, one can sit at least 20 minutes. But for many people, that's really challenging in the beginning. Even if it's only 5 minutes, it's better doing it every day than doing it once a week for longer. Doing it longer is better, is good, but start with what you can and grow it gradually. Unless you're like me and you want to just dive in head first, you can start sitting for 20, 30 minutes or longer at a time, every time. Wandering mind, many other thoughts coming. Welcome to the club. Don't worry about it. Doesn't mean that it's not working or you can't do it. It's just part of the process. So, anybody wants to talk more or ask things when we go outside? I'm ready to spend some more time. We need to vacate the space for the next class. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade. Namaskar. We have this greeting, namaskar. It means the divinity within me, the essence, if you like that better, salutes that within you, the same within you, with all the mind and all the love of the heart. To each and every one of you, namaskar. Mm-hmm.